Hi, this is Axel from dreamsanctuary.net. Welcome to this audio video where I will look at one of my own dreams and explain how I interpret it. I do have some guidelines in an article that you can read online at dreamsanctuary.net/template. I'm happy with that article, but it's lacking a few examples, so I thought I would make a video on how I go about it. Before we talk about the dream, it's important to remember that we're dealing with a mystery, something unknown, or in modern terms, something unconscious. That means not conscious, unconscious. To explore this mystery, we need a working hypothesis. Jung's most concise quote on this topic is the following: "We must remember the working hypothesis we have used for the interpretation of dreams. The images in dreams and spontaneous fantasies are symbols, that is, the best possible formulation for still unknown or unconscious facts, which generally compensate the content of consciousness or the conscious attitude." This is quite a sizable quote, so I would like to emphasize 3 points. The first one is that dreams are made of psychic facts. They're not material facts, they're not scientific facts, but they're facts from the psyche. In fact, that's how I would define psychic. It's what is not material. And so when a dream is showing that you're drowning, for instance, well, it's a psychic fact that from the standpoint of the unconscious, it looks like you're drowning. This ties into the second point, which is that those psychic facts are expressed with symbols or symbolic language. And for Jung, a symbol is an expression for something unknown or not yet knowable, and the sensuously perceptible expression of an inner experience. That means that symbols and symbolic language is the way for the unconscious to express itself. It's the way for the inner experience to express itself into consciousness. These psychic facts, expressed in symbolic language, have a function, which is described as a compensation of the conscious attitude. This means that if your attitude is too one-sided about something, the dream will provide its own view as a way to correct the bias, or at least provide information for you to correct the bias. This is called homeostasis, which means return to balance. The conclusion of these 3 points is that we must side with the unconscious as closely as possible. It's providing information that helps us to achieve balance. And this is the definition that Robert Alex Johnson gives for a dream. He says, "A dream is information you should have but don't." This puts it in a nutshell. A dream is information you should have, but don't. This allows us to set up some guidelines on how to work with a dream. I'm referring here to Johnson's book, Inner Work, and I've modified the guidelines slightly for my personal use. We can now go to the dream. The first step is to write the dream down. This must be done in a kind of stream of consciousness way. You don't censor anything, you just write as it comes, and then maybe you do some edits to improve readability. I like also to give a title to my dream. It kind of shows what's the most important thing for me, that was the whole dream. This one's called Walking Alone. It's made of 2 dreams and I had them in late 2020. The first dream is very short. I am walking alone. I woke up. Yeah, that's it, but you'll see it's important. The second dream goes like this. I am in the pharmacy and I want a cough syrup for my sore throat. The seller tells me they don't have it. Strange, it's a common item, I think to myself. I leave and walk to the next shop. The next shop is Amativa, a natural health store. As I get close to it, I cannot enter. It's so overcrowded that it's impossible to enter inside. Not wanting to wait, I leave and try my luck somewhere else. I walk into a newsagent and look at what they sell. They have a few items. I see some designer toasters and it frustrates me. Disappointed, I leave the store and walk away for good. If you're watching the video, you've noticed that I've bolded some terms. Those are what I call key symbols. So a key symbols for me is something that you cannot remove from the dream. It's so essential that if you try to remove it, the whole dream breaks down. Some people might argue that actually all symbols in dreams are important, and I do share that position. However, in long dreams, this is simply not possible. Once you have the key symbols, you need to provide spontaneous associations. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the word, especially in the context of the dreams? So when I think about pharmacy in the context of a dream, I think about big pharma, authority, pre-made solutions. For cough syrup and sore throat, I associate both of them with the throat, stuck emotions. Amativa is something I have very positive associations with. It's basically one of my favorite health store. A news agent, I would say I have slightly negative associations. I think about junk shop, miscellaneous items. For designer toasters, I have strongly negative associations. The one in the dreams were ugly and overpriced. For me, a toaster is a basic item, so paying a lot for a designer toaster is basically a scam. As you can see, sometimes you don't need to be very precise with the associations. Saying it's very positive or it's very negative or maybe it's mixed is enough. And if you look at the first symbol, the first dream, which is walking alone, I actually have no associations with it, and that's okay. The next step is to provide the personal context. As we established, a dream responds to a conscious attitude. So we need to ask ourselves a question, which is, what happened recently in my life that could be associated with the dream? Why did you have that dream last night and not 2 nights ago or another time? What is the factor that created the dream or triggered the dream? So when I ask myself those questions, this is what I came up with. I am in a situation where I want to join an online group and contribute to it, yet I don't seem to fit. I also lost some online friends recently over an unexpected conflict. I have plans for the future, but I doubt I can carry them to terms. For the next step, I like to go through the dream, break it scene by scene, and feel into the dynamics of each scene. So the first scene is the pharmacy, which is pre-made solution. There's the sore throat and cough syrup, which links to emotions. And the seller tells me that cough syrup is not available. So the main feeling of that scene is disappointment. The next scene is at the health shop. It's too busy, I can't enter. So there's also a feeling of disappointment, but it's more feeling resigned. There's a bit of impatience as well, but it's justified because I can't enter. The last scene is the one at the new agent, and it's a negative reaction. There's a feeling of anger or feeling scammed. All 3 scenes have the same dynamism. I go into a place, I can't find what I'm looking for, but they all accentuate different aspects of the phenomenon. So now, before we go to the interpretation, we can see a story arc. So we have a beginning, a setting, which I'm trying to solve an emotional problem indicated by the sore throat and the cough syrup. Then there's the bulk of the dream, which is the drama and tension, which shows 3 unworkable situations. And finally, there's the resolution, and the dream ends by me being alone, which explains the first dream. Indeed, the first dream was me walking alone, but we don't know why. With the second dreams, we now know why, because every attempt that I made is a failure. So that's the interpretation. Neither of those 3 options are appropriate for me. Attempting to interact with those structures, which I see as joining or belonging in groups in a way to ease my emotions, this simply won't work. Therefore, the dream shows that I must keep walking alone. So how do I know this is a correct interpretation? Robert Johnson in his book says that a good interpretation teaches something new, and that is the case. And the second factor, which is very important, it should have a kind of humbling effect on the ego. And this interpretation fits. It's unglamorous, and there's a bit of grief when I realize that I'm on my own and I have to keep walking alone. The last step of a dream interpretation is to take action on the inside of the dreams. Otherwise, the whole process is wasted. So for me, I decided to give up on joining or rejoining the groups, and I started working on my plans. Those plans ended up being my website. A few comments on this dream. First, it's a very coherent and simple dream. This is why I'm using it as an example. And it's not a big archetypal dream, it's more of a personal dream. Having said that, big archetypal dreams are much more difficult to understand, whereas personal dreams are usually simpler, so they both have trade-offs. Finally, you can see I'm fairly comfortable with using low resolution understanding. I'm much more guided by feelings, and I find value in saying, well, this is positive, this is negative, and this I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't diminish the intellectual work of dreams, but when you don't know what you're dealing with, it's better to rely on your feelings and your gut instincts. In fact, if we look at the theme of the dream, I would say this is a dream about individuation. It's becoming a unique individual, which makes it impossible to fit in any given structure. So, individuation is first ejection from the collective before returning to it. I would suggest to read the definition of individuation in Daryl's sharp Jung Lexicon that you can read for free online. A part I would like to emphasize says the following. Individuation cuts one off from personal conformity and hence from collectivity. That is the guilt which the individuant leaves behind him for the world. That is the guilt he must endeavor to redeem. He must offer a ransom in place of himself. That is, he must bring forth values which are an equivalent substitute for his absence in the collective personal sphere. Without this production of values, final individuation is immoral, and more than that, suicidal. The individuant has no a priori claim to any kind of esteem. He has to be content with whatever esteem flows to him from outside by virtues of the values he creates. Not only has society a right, it also has a duty to condemn the individuant if he fails to create equivalent values. This dream makes me think about the myth of Parsifal as described by Robert Johnson. In that story, we have two characters that meet at some point, the Fool and the Fisher King. The Fisher King has a wound, which is described as the bitter state between old and new consciousness, psychologically speaking. It's a wound of masculine development. It's that state where one knows that there is more to life, but is unable to access it on command, and thus we grow bitter. This happens because you have a Grail Castle experience, as Robert Johnson says. That's an overwhelming experience that orients you towards something that's bigger than life, bigger than yourself, but it also wounds you, because normal life then becomes difficult to bear. Maybe you have that wound yourself, or that Grail Castle experience. Maybe you have experienced an overwhelming synchronicities. Maybe you have a sense that whatever this life is, there's more to it. And I'm not talking about inflation here, but a real embodied experiential sense of, I know something else is possible, but it's gone and it's not coming back. This is the wound of the Fisher King, and the only one who can approach that wound is the Fool. Not only that, the Fool can actually heal the wound by asking the question, whom does the Grail serve? For me, I don't have a good answer to that, but I can surely say that whoever the Grail serves is not just me. Yes, it does serve me, but it doesn't just serve me. If you want to know more about the myth of Parsifal, I will link in the description box two videos, one short and one fairly long. So now that we know that the Fool is the one that heals the Fisher King's wound, we can study the Fool by looking at the Tarot de Marseille, or the one restored by Jodorowsky. In that tarot, the Fool, in French le mât, does not have a number, which means he's ever present. He's the burst of energy that's always available. He's the transforming agent between stages of life or stages of consciousness. In his book, The Way of Tarot, Jodorowsky writes, the Fool shows us that the capacity to act is also acquired through the initiatory crossing through madness and death. In my understanding, the Fool is the adventurous spirit that does not have a predetermined end. It's adventure for the sake of adventure. It's life for the sake of life. That's what makes it foolish, risky, dangerous, but also necessary. I hope you've enjoyed or found interesting this video about dream interpretation. Maybe I'll make a series of those. Anyway, all links in the description box for more information on the topic I've touched, and until next time.